Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Howell with my good buddy Tristan Levitt. We're here on the OP podcast. It's not really a podcast. We just film things, put it on the internet, but we call it a podcast because I don't know why we do it actually, and I'm talking faster than I'm thinking. But to discuss a bombshell report, and this is really wild stuff, and it harkens back to something you all may be familiar with from the Obama years, is Tristan of Empower Oversight, who I've known for a long time. I'm kind of the brains, he's the brawn, right? What did they say?
That's what people say, yes.
Something like that. So, Tristan, who are you? Who are you with? What you up to?
So Tristan Levitt, right now I'm the president of Empower Oversight. As you know, I came here after leading a couple different agencies during the Trump administration, and we have been working with a lot of different whistleblowers over the past few years, including a lot of FBI whistleblowers testifying in front of the Weaponization Subcommittee and IRS agents on the Hunter Biden case. But now we have a bombshell from the DEA, and they came to us because of the work that my partner Jason Foster and I did 15 years ago on Operation Fast and Furious with trafficking of guns at the ATF.
Yeah, a little reminder, Fast and Furious. I mean, I remember it vividly because you lived it and breathed it every single day of our working together. But for those out there who might have to reach back in the memory bank, what was Operation Fast and Furious?
So an ATF agent came forward to us in Senator Grassley's office, and his basic disclosure was that ATF had adopted a strategy of, rather than stopping firearms when they knew that they were being trafficked and going to Mexican drug cartels, of just allowing them to go instead. And the idea was that they were going to somehow make a bigger case. Eventually, they went up on a federal wiretap, and ultimately 2,500, mostly AK-47s. There were quite a few 50 caliber rifles thrown in for good measure. And they were going all over Mexico, being trafficked. People were dying because of that, but it wasn't until Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry was killed on December 15th, 2010, that it really came to the American consciousness after John disclosed to Congress that it was those weapons that were recovered at the scene. So there were really a lot of repercussions of that. It really was the biggest scandal of the Obama administration. It resulted in the first sitting cabinet member being held in contempt of Congress, Eric Holder. And it also resulted in a number of protocols to try and stop future awareness by law enforcement agencies of just knowing things were going out the door that were dangerous and allowing it to happen anyway.
So, you're a public policy guy. What is the public policy argument for giving a bunch of AK-47s to Mexican drug cartels? Why would they do that?
So ATF had been criticized in the past because so many firearms were going south. They called it an Iron River. And the criticism from the Inspector General in 2008 actually was, you aren't doing enough to stop the overall network. They were kind of playing whack-a-mole, they described it. You pick up low-level people who are trying to buy these and traffic them. They call those straw purchasers. They would lie on a form when asked, are you buying for yourselves? They would be the ones going into a gun store with a duffel bag full of cash and leaving with 20 AK-47s, which is legal, but the firearms dealers were saying, hey, this looks really suspicious. We think bad things are happening with these. We think we should stop them. We think you should stop them, ATF. And ATF, after this criticism, said, well, maybe what we need to do then is to just allow them to go to Mexico, and then we'll be able to prove that they're going to the cartels. My partner, Jason Foster, compares it to a part of a South Park episode. Underwear gnomes. Step one, right? Allow the guns to go. Step two, question mark. Step three, take down the drug cartel, right? That was the grand master plan. And it really became a very consuming thing for ATF in Phoenix, Arizona. But then as the number of guns got bigger and bigger, they would report this up the Justice Department chain, and they were getting all these accolades for it. Like, wow, 1,000 guns. Look at the great work you guys are doing tracking this group. Wow, 1,500 guns. Can you believe this, right? And so no one stopped to think like, is the reason that they're getting so large because we're not stopping them.
It's kind of the Southern Poverty Law Center paying for, its own like hate extremists, except the Obama administration paying for, guns to fly south and then or flow south and catching them. But ended in absolute tragedy. It was disgusting what happened.
Well, John Dodson would call it a self-licking ice cream cone. He was the original ATF whistleblower. It was just a government program that, again, just allowed, it grows and grows and grows because of just the momentum that it has without anyone ever stopping it. So
always been opposed to self-licking ice cream cones. I want to be the licker of the ice cream cone. If you have the ice cream cone lick itself, defeats the purpose of, the ice cream cone.
I hear your point. When I think of a self-licking ice cream cone, I'm just terrified by the disembodied, like, what's happening here. So we don't need that in government, that's for sure.
No, we don't. There's enough slush funds without self-consuming.
Slushy funds.
Don't let that happen. Yeah. So bring us up to modern day. You got something that reminds me a lot of Fast and Furious.
Yeah, for months we've been talking about this is the fentanyl Fast and Furious. So DEA agent David Howell is in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
No relation.
No relation to Mike. But regardless, he was really focused on taking down fentanyl traffickers, right? And that's part of the job in New Mexico is you're investigating, you come across folks who are trafficking lots of different types of drugs. But after there were protocols that were adopted by the Trump administration in 2019 to say, hey, if fentanyl is something you become aware from wiretap is trafficked, we're going to mimic what we did with these firearms protocols and say, you have to step in and stop it. It's not like walking other types of drugs because fentanyl is so deadly. And so in 2023, Howell was involved in a case where he knew that they were trafficking fentanyl. They had gotten up on a wiretap. The whole point is to try and bring these individuals down. And yet when the time came and he seized their fentanyl, the U.S. Attorney's Office of New Mexico gave him all kinds of hell for it. And they told him that they wanted to try and make bigger cases, so they needed to not tip off the existence of the wire. He, as is the case often with law enforcement, he did not. There are lots of ways to seize fentanyl from somebody without divulging that it is the DEA who is onto you, right? So that's somebody who's embedded within a task force. It just seems like local law enforcement. They do just a routine traffic stop. So this was all taken care of it that way, but nevertheless, the U.S. Attorney's Office really pushed back on that. That's ironic because at the time, the main Justice Department headquarters personnel were still operating under the procedures from this 2019 anti-fentanyl protocol. So they were asking all kinds of questions when a packet got sent up to them for renewal of the wiretap saying, are you doing everything you can to seize the fentanyl? If you come aware of a stash house, are you obtaining warrants for that? They were doing everything exactly the way that it was intended to. So it was the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Mexico that was stopping the seizure of these drugs. Soon thereafter, David was part of a surveillance operation where there were 74,000 fentanyl pills in one vehicle, and they were told to stand down, to not seize those. So David filed with the Office of Special Counsel, filed a whistleblower complaint. He went up the chain and said, hey, this is a problem we think needs to change. And as he did this, he increasingly became aware of more and more trafficking like this that was going on. So ultimately, he was really shocked to find out that there were cases where literally millions of pills were going.
So in the course of millions of pills, there have to be countless overdoses and other things associated with it. Do we have any evidence that like those pills contributed to it, or is it just unknowable? And
it's unknowable, forensically impossible to determine. Firearms have serial numbers on them, obviously. Fentanyl, there's no way to tell which pill comes from where. But we do know that obviously all fentanyl in the U.S. essentially is trafficked through the southern border. And so the fentanyl that was walked in New Mexico has undoubtedly traveled all across the country. One of the people that the DEA later took down, his operation was based in Oregon. And so they were working from there again. All throughout the country, fentanyl is gone. No way to know, but it would be impossible for that much fentanyl to not have killed Americans.
Right. And I mean, as in President Trump has declared it to be a weapon of mass destruction. And so during the Biden years, hundreds of thousands of pills that are now deemed to be a weapon of mass destruction were percolating through the system with government knowledge as part of an exercise to hopefully catch an even bigger fish than hundreds of thousands of fentanyl pills.
Yeah, that's right. And just as there was some criticism by the Inspector General of ATF, what the DEA or particularly the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Mexico has really said is, look, we want to not just take down the people who were transporting it, we wanted to take down the entire network. But others who've come forward after our client did have said, look, we could have taken some of these things down much earlier. At the beginning of the Trump administration, Pam Bondi in May, they flew out people from New Mexico because the DEA in New Mexico had an exciting development, a takedown of the largest seizure of fentanyl ever, 3 million pills. Little did she know what we know now today, which is that that number had been stacking up over time, for one. For two, a DEA supervisor who spoke to the Associated Press after they were investigating our client's allegations told them that they could have taken that whole entire trafficking ring down 6 months earlier. And in the meantime, that amount of 3 million pills that they seized at the end was being trafficked every single month.
That's just utter insanity. And so what is the motivation of like the U.S. attorney for not doing anything apart from just wanting to get some sort of, the biggest bust in history type accolade? Is it just that? Is it just human nature of being willing to risk other people's lives in order to kind of like set some sort of record without regard to the damage that can be caused in between?
It's impossible to know. My guess is two different things. I think that gets wrapped up. It gets kind of clothed in some more lofty rhetoric, which is, well, we have to make sure we take down the entire operation, right? And so if someone, is telling themselves, well, if we just took down the people we know now, maybe there's more, maybe there are others. But I think it's impossible to separate that from, hey, we're getting attention here. This is, we're being told, oh, you're doing a great job with these wiretaps, et cetera. And, the other challenge is for those that sometimes you have these strategies concocted by people who don't have a strong law enforcement background. Operation Fast and Furious was absolutely that way. The people that were pioneering the strategy had never worked as beat cops. They had kind of zero true law enforcement sense. Here, you've got, the former attorney Alex Ubalez who's saying, this is the strategy we needed to follow to work our way up. I think it was removed from the reality on the ground because, again, even at the time, we know that they weren't able to, obviously, they weren't stopping it all. One of the things that happened as a result of Special Agent Howell, in relation, blowing the whistle, was that those protocols that had been in place since 2019 were changed by the Biden administration. They took those in 2024 and they completely gutted them to say, okay, well, now you, U.S. Attorney, you do have discretion. And that was the whole reason these protocols were created to begin with. The firearms protocols were because it was the Arizona U.S. Attorney's Office that was really pushing this on ATF. Here you have the New Mexico U.S. Attorney's Office, but when David Howell complained about it to Maine Justice, they said, well, then we're going to go back to, we're going to follow the lead of what the New Mexico U.S. Attorney was doing. So after that, especially, this seems like it became a bigger and bigger problem, including that case that was taken down at the beginning of the Trump administration that nobody bothered to take down earlier there. So I do think there's also an element of just kind of self-delusion and thinking, hey, this is the strategy we need to pursue, and some of it being driven by people that didn't have experience in law enforcement or just the common sense to say, but what happens to all this fentanyl that we're letting out on the streets? What will the human cost be?
Right. I think that's a question during the Biden administration that was never even contended with or answered. I mean, if you broaden out the context of the time period of which this was happening, worst border crisis in American history, and one by design. I don't think anyone argues at this point that there was some intent behind it, and it was a massive political mistake for the Democrats. But it's a shame that it's even termed a political mistake because it was really like a human lives mistake. Like that was a fentanyl smuggler's dream environment where the border was open. This stuff was running roughshod across the country, deaths of despair through the roof. Meanwhile, you have like also in the smaller context, still a huge context, in this U.S. Attorney's Office, like the same type of thinking. It's kind of just like a fundamental failure of the government under that leadership to contend with like one of the biggest problems in this country right now.
It's tragic. And it's really sad to look right now. You see the New Mexico governor, in fact, all the way down their entire congressional delegation, the Albuquerque mayor, really outraged about this, which any human being should be. You do have to also wonder why they didn't speak up more, again, during the Biden administration about the border policies. But especially now to see what the impact of all this fentanyl running loose was, and knowing that federal law enforcement could have stopped it has created some real tension between those in New Mexico and these federal delegations. So, they are saying there was a press conference today on June 30th. Is that the day?
Seems about right.
The 29th.
It's June.
It's June. So the press conference, they were talking about how they might need to sue the federal government, try and get millions of dollars in reparations there. But this element of the fact that these problems happened during prior administration, the New Mexico governor is also trying to pin some of it on the Trump administration. So at the end of the day, you see these tragic human consequences. Now politicians are weighing in, trying to figure out what they're going to make of that, and it's just really unfortunate to see where we're at.
That is. Something else, and I don't know whether to call this unfortunate or fortunate, but it's just a reality. I mean, this news doesn't come out if not for the whistleblower, David Howell, no relation. But it also doesn't come out without you and Empower Oversight, which is like, it's great that it got out, but you had to build basically an organization to help those people navigate the complexities of a bureaucracy that's often weaponized against truth tellers. Can you just speak to kind of the system of whistleblowing as you see it and why what you and Empower do are so necessary to realize the full potential of it?
Yeah. So really, I think the kernel behind Empower Oversight really came from Operation Fast and Furious because that original ATF whistleblower, John Dodson, couldn't get any of the existing whistleblower groups that were around at the time. We worked with them on policy. We cooperated, even if they were more left of center. They represented a lot of whistleblowers. We tried to help whoever we could. But when he came forward, that was so politically explosive, they refused to represent him. And that really struck us as a real, just a real disservice to the people coming forward there. So the vision behind Empower Oversight was to help people, across the board, to be able to help those people who especially needed to go to Congress and to disclose this kind of really significant information. So Jason Foster founded it at the beginning of the Biden administration. And it's been a pleasure working with him over these last few years. But the model of just helping people that come forward from the government that have these disclosures, they're always the best source of information in government. They're always going to give you the raw, unfiltered truth, right? And Congress all too often doesn't have that perspective. They have the talking points that come to them from administration flacks, and that's tough because, again, sometimes they have enough information to do their jobs, but other times there are really significant problems in the federal government, and they're not going to hear about them. So that's why Empower Oversight does what we do. We want to make sure that people that have these kinds of disclosures have the representation to bring that information to Congress, to be safe in doing so, to not be retaliated against.
Yeah, and how would you assess kind of the decision-making matrix of a potential whistleblower? Because retaliation happens all the time. Can you kind of just walk us through what's in the mind of a federal government employee, a patriotic person who sees something wrong happening, and they're contending with, I got to say something about it. Who do I tell? What's going to happen to me if I tell them?
It's a very hard question. And frankly, I would never blame someone that decides not to blow the whistle. But I think part of what happens usually is people look at it and say, they see a problem. Usually they talk to their coworkers about it. And then maybe they talk to their manager and say, hey, did you know this is going on? And if the manager says, shut your yapper, right? Then they say, okay, I can see this is not going to be a real place that I can try and fix these issues, right? And so usually what happens is people either work their way kind of further up the chain of command in their own agency, trying to say, hey, this supervisor doesn't care about that, but surely you do, or you do, or you do. Most whistleblowers are really kind of, I hate to say naive, right? But they have a strong moral compass, and they expect that other people will too. So when they run into, a lack of fortitude and weak-kneed individuals, then they say, well, this is really important. So someone's got to do something about this. And that's how they usually end up going outside of the agency. I think it is difficult because people look at what can happen to you as a whistleblower and how some have been really severely punished. And I do think that can have a chilling effect if you allow that to go on. That people say, well, I know this is a problem, and this is a problem, but if we speak up about it, we're going to be cut off at the knees. It could ruin our careers. So I think it is a very difficult decision matrix. But when people know that there are protections, regardless of whether they are somebody that Empower Oversight can help or not, part of the decision matrix, I think, has to be, it's important to do with legal counsel to make sure you can navigate those protections. The IRS whistleblowers dealt with a criminal statute that protects taxpayer privacy. And so they not only had to deal with the whistleblower protections, but how do we do this in a way that doesn't violate these protections that really are important for taxpayers? And so having legal counsel is really important. But at the end of the day, it's a tough process. It's a process that can take time. People usually don't realize that whistleblower protections in the statute aren't the same as like a magic shield or umbrella that is going to stop retaliation automatically from happening. Sometimes, crap hits the fan and you have to go and try and get those rights vindicated by going to an administrative agency or going to court. And so it can be a tough road, but it's one that, again, patriotic people can have a huge impact on. And that's what statistics say is actually the number one thing that makes a difference for whistleblowers is, will my disclosure make a difference? It's not, am I going to be retaliated against? It's, if I speak up about this, is it actually going to change? Am I going to be able to change the real world effects that are going on here? If so, for many people, that's the motivator.
Yeah, that's so huge. I was going to bring that up if you did not. The accountability end of the equation, which is the hardest part of this whole thing. When you have a divided government and not even an energetic government at times for anything other than, passing CRs and slush funds and cable news hits, they're happy to take your story and then to go tell it on Fox News or have a hearing where a whistleblower is featured and sympathized with. But then once, the KPIs hit on the comms metrics, it's wipe your hands clean and move on and thank you for your service. But I think if we were to get to a place where the government was accountable, and there's multiple ways that can happen. Like there's so many built-in structural ways. The most obvious is like we have a legislative branch that's supposed to reign supreme and like change the laws based on things, that went wrong. In this instance with the DEA, there's policy that was changed, but then as you noted, completely ripped up and thrown away. And so restoring a culture of accountability in Washington, D.C., not going to happen anytime soon, but you and I got quite a few working years left, so we'll keep aiming towards that. I think we go such a long way towards fostering an environment where more people came forward. I mean, look what Doge was able to uncover, and you just sit back and think like, how many Americans of goodwill were sitting in those bureaucracies, being like, yeah, this is stinky, but it's 5 o'clock and it's closing time, and I need this job, so I gotta go home. So we got a long road ahead, but Empower Oversight's paving the way. Thanks for coming on, my friends.
Thank you so much. Please, know that we are grateful for the stuff you all do, and we want to make sure that if there are others that we can help, poweroversight.org is the place people can go. They can take their disclosures there, or they can support the work that we're doing, and hopefully we will get to that place of accountability in the government one day.
One day. Well, thank you for what you do.
Thanks, man.
Catch you next time.